各位观众，大家好，我是黄河边。今天是2021年的5月26号，今天已经是27号了。今天呢非常的特别，我们呢邀请到加拿大的著名的Wilful Blindness 的著名记者Sam Kooper来到我们的节目当中。今天呢，另外还有2位Mina 跟 Jimmy 呢，今天要全程担任翻译。Hello, Mr. Kooper. Welcome to my channel.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a real honor.
谢谢你的邀请，我很荣幸来到这里。
非常感谢。非常感谢。Sam Kooper 今天是在新书发表之后是第1次参加我们华人社区的视频频道的接受我们的采访。
So welcome to this. I don't think it's accurate because 就是说他不是第一次吧，他之前好像接受了其他的华人频道的采访，
就是我们自媒体嘛。
Yeah. So 黄河边 claims this is the first interview, but based on my knowledge, probably this is not the very first interview to the Chinese community. There was a previous one hosted probably by another Chinese kind of a personality like radio or TV.
To my knowledge, this is the first live interview. I know that Radio Free Asia had accessed the video of a panel launch, but this is the first interview for the Chinese community I'm involved in.
Okay, that's my bad. 所以我说错了，是他自己也说这是第一个华人的这个媒体的第1次采访。谢谢
我们也非常感谢 Sam Kooper 长期以来对我们华人社区新闻和事件的关注。
我们也非常感谢 Sam Kooper 长期以来对我们
Mina， 你把你的声音关掉。
Sorry.
So, thank you, Mr. Kooper, for your continued attention and to the Chinese community in North America. Yeah.
Thank you. Mina is a person that I have interviewed over the years, going back to, I believe, before 2015, and following her community leadership and her political career. And I always thought Mina was a refreshing and important voice in Canada and Vancouver. And I'm so glad to be here with her and you as well, everyone.
Thank you. 他是说他以前在2015年之前也采访过 Mina 很多次，所以对 Mina 的这个领导力和他的在政治上的参与呢，这个有熟悉，并且他认为 Mina 的这个参与呢是重要的，然后是代表重要的这个社区的声音，也很高兴来到这个节目和大家一起讨论。
好的，那么今天呢，这个 Mina 和我呢，一起来给Sam Kooper 提一些问题。Mina 呢已经把这个书呢全部看过了。所以呢，他提的问题呢，可能更有针对性
先讲一下，我没全看完，因为这本书很厚很厚的一本书，所以呢没有全看完。但是呢，但是我以前有看他的这个文章，在报纸里头有他的报道这样子，所以我对他的这个他的这本书还有他的写作的背景有一定的了解。那昨天晚上我在看呢。哎呀，真是放不下呀！我都不想睡觉，很紧张，很精彩那个内容就像有点像那个侦探小说这样子的，就不敢相信是真的事实，但是它有真的这个事实在，就是 evidence 这种有这个证人这样子的很震惊。
So Mina hasn't finished basically reading the whole book. However, she manages to read many of them, and actually last night, and she can put it down. And basically, she's amazed by the background, and also it's like it's detective story and very eye-opening to her.
And also, I want to let everybody know that I have some people that are English speakers that are very interested. They might be here as well. So this is this is a truly bilingual. So we have a probably audience that is English speaking. I don't know if they're online or not, but Huang Hebian might have a better idea whether who are online. And so Jimmy is going to do Mandarin and English bilingual translation for our audiences.
Okay. Should I translate or?
你可以用普通话给大家翻译一下吗？
就是米娜也今天是有可能邀请了其他的就是不同语言组的这个背景的人来，所以今天的这个活动呢是真正意义上的一个双语的，所以他是说可能这个主持人可能更多的了解这个今天是不是邀请的这些观众是不是已经到场来观看了。
好的，那我们现在就开始啊。
好 ，Let's begin the questions
作为加拿大的这个著名的记者，我们知道呢，Kooper，他从2017年开始就撰写了很多和中国有关的文章，比如说呢，中国的军方在 BC 省呢开办商店。那么我很好奇，Mina，你的那个声音可能有一点问题。
我没有开我的东西。
好的，就说我想请教一下，就是库珀先生，你是什么时候开始关注中国的？另外，你写这本书最重要的目的是什么？写的时候有没有什么压力？
Okay, as an award-winning Canadian journalist, you have been writing articles about business operated by entities that are affiliated with China's military. I am curious, when did you begin to pay attention to activities in the local Chinese-speaking communities? Have you experienced any pressure when writing the book? And what do you want to achieve from writing and publishing this book?
Well, that's right. I would say Mina would be aware that I really started to follow real estate and politics in Vancouver when I was a City Hall reporter. I quickly became aware that politics and real estate development went hand in hand. You could not understand what Vancouver City Hall politics without understanding real estate development, because in fact, the real estate developers were so politically influential and so financially important. So I think I sought to understand political, potentially issues of corruption, let's say, and how it related to development in Vancouver. And that led me to trying to understand what we could call the big fish of development players in Vancouver, and how they often related to flows of offshore money in various East Asia countries. And so once I started to understand real estate, I then looked back at cases such as Lai Shangjing and his activity in Canada and his relations to underground banking and politics within mainland China and business activity in Hong Kong, and how his, as I got deeper into cases such as Mr. Lai, I understood that what appeared to be on the surface normal investment companies very often could have links to entities within the Chinese government or the People's Liberation Army. And so bringing it back to my modern day investigations, when the news of the casino money laundering scandal in British Columbia exploded in 2017 with my stories on the e-pirate investigations, I was surprised to find that many of the large VIP gamblers were related to underground banking. And I found in those cases, some had links to the Chinese state and the People's Liberation Army. So I was looking at the past, the present, and realizing those patterns of, let's say, state-sponsored actors getting very active in real estate development in Canada. Is there pressure related to my reporting? Certainly, it came from many avenues. Just Vancouver City Hall reporting, I quickly realized that, let's just say, the domestic developers had a lot of influence. I don't think they wanted much probing into real estate activity and their influence in City Hall. And we can equally say that as I got into whether the Chinese state and very large investors from China had a lot of influence in Vancouver politics and real estate, certainly I did get pressure back from a number of domestic and foreign actors.
Okay. 他是说这个像米娜也会了解到，就是说他从接洽这些报道的话，是从当时的地产来入手的，然后地产呢就牵涉到很多政治的，然后当最早的时候，他是在这个温哥华的市政府，就是驻市政府的这样的一个报道员的这样的一个身份的时候，他开始接触到就是地产和政治之间的这样的一个联系，特别是温哥华市政府，然后呢就有很多的开发商，然后他们在政治上和财务上都是非常的这个捆绑度非常高，所以呢也就有很多的这样的舞弊，就 corruption 的这样的一些 issue， 特别是从温哥华开始，然后他就开始慢慢浮出水面的，就是在温哥华通过地产呢浮出了很多中间的一些所谓的大鱼，也就是说一些这个主要的一些人物，然后他呢是在这个基础上呢，然后逐步这个接洽到了赖昌星这个案子，然后通过赖昌星在加拿大这个案子中间呢，他就看到赖昌星和地下钱庄，主要是通过地下的手段来转钱的这样的一个关联。然后他从2017年开始呢，主要是就是在这个没有这边的是说这个赖昌星这件事情之后呢，浮出水面的是有很多的这样的一些实体，这些实体呢都是和中国政府和中国的军方有关。在2017年以后，他主要是在温哥华的赌场的这个一系列的调查，因为赌场也涉及到洗钱的一些问题中间，然后逐步的呢，他就开始这个看到很多的赌场里面的 VIP 的一些重要的，就是赌资比较大的这样的一些赌徒呢，都和通过地下钱庄呢有来往，然后呢，这些地下钱庄呢都有各种各样的信息呢，指向的是中国的政府机构和中国的军方，所以从过去到现在，然后呢，都展现出了一系列的，就是说这个 pattern 是指一些模式，而这个模式呢，都是跟政府所相关的这个运作是有关系的。如果说到这个压力的话，他说其实他在温哥华做市政府做这个 report 的时候，已经受到了很多来自于开发商的这方面的压力。同时呢，他是说这个在他后续的报道的时候，他也收到了在本地的，然后呢这种来自于本地的跟这个中国政府有关的，然后也收到过一些关于进国，他是说 foreign， 但是这些可能是在本地的，但是是国外的一些这些实体所带来的一些压力。谢谢。
这个您的书名呢很有意思，叫有意无视或者叫视而不见啊，就是说这对于加拿大政府啊，尤其是政界其实是有很大的警示性，包括加拿大的社会。那么你在书中呢提到加拿大整个系统出现了问题，强大的中国政府的游说者深入各个领域，这种状况究竟有多严重呢？我想请教。
The second question is, your book titled Wilful Blindness is very intriguing, which tolls an alarm bell for Canadian society and the government. So you raised concerns over the systemic problem in our Canadian government. So how severe is such infiltration by the China government in Canada?
Well, thanks for noticing the title. And for your listeners, willful blindness does have a legal meaning. This relates to people that are in a position of regulatory authority that know about wrongdoing, whether it is financial or political corruption, and should act against it, but do not for reasons of benefits to themselves or their networks. In the casino story, willful blindness was so apparent. It's proven beyond a shadow of doubt, I believe in the book, with the evidence. For example, high-level casino executives, one of the best examples, filed a memo in October 2014 saying Xi Jinping's crackdown on capital flight, money laundering, and corruption, whether it's the Fox Hunt or the Skynet investigations and their crackdown in Macau, would lead to further VIP gambling in the River Rock Casino. Therefore, the casino made the business plan. We should increase our VIP offerings to capture that capital flight and suspected money laundering activity. This is willful blindness. To your question regarding infiltration of the party in Canadian politics, I tracked back to Hong Kong with a famous case that a small number of Canadians know, where it was alleged that tycoons in Hong Kong had corrupted immigration officials in the Canadian High Commission and sought to influence or buy their way into Canada with real estate investment. And this is another case of willful blindness. If we understand that it's alleged that these tycoons in Hong Kong had links to the People's Liberation Army and the Chinese Communist Party, I think it follows that the infiltration did occur, and it very likely corruption did occur in some powerful offices, bureaucracy in Ottawa, to let these alleged immigration frauds and immigration investor activity was a big part of it, happen. So I do believe that the evidence, a circumstantial case suggests that there was a good deal of infiltration from networks of organized criminals with nefarious relationships to state actors in China and Hong Kong. And Canada's democracy certainly has been put at risk due to some of that activity.
OK， 好的。然后是这个主要就是说通过这个他看到的，他说谢谢你，首先注意到了这个名字。这个名字呢，首先在法律上呢，它是有一个定义的。这个定义就是说，当这个监管的官员呢是理应作为的时候，而不去作为，那么这个就叫 willful blindness， 然后视而不见。然后在这个他的赌场的调查中间呢，就变得非常的明显，因为这个里面有充分的证据表明呢，有高级官员，这个官员就是不是指中国官员，就是加拿大解放的官员呢，也在2014年的10月份的有一份 memo 里面表现，就是说他们发现说中国有这个迹象显示呢，就是说会增加未来在比方说加拿大的有一个叫 River Rock 的这样的一个赌场的这样生意的时候，他们就是做出的决定实际上是增加在 River Rock 赌场的这个 VIP 的这样的一个位置，所以他们得到的信息是很早的，并且他们其实在这个过程中间充分吸纳了这样的一些 VIP 的赌徒的这个进入。那么在渗透的过程中间呢，通过这个香港的一个非常著名的这个案件的话，就是香港的就是有非常大款啊 tycoon 的话呢，就是超级富豪呢有这样的这个在加拿大呢，伴随着这个舞弊啊这样的腐败的这样的一个现象，那么通过就是贿赂 High Commission 的，就是这些监管人员，这个高级的这个commission 的中文叫什么？然后他总归是说带着就是说这样的情况之下呢，都是展现出他们和中国的军方之间有联系，这是有证据的。但是呢，他说的可能性呢，就是说这种也展现出一种就是存在着就是腐败的可能性，然后能够看到是渥太华这边呢，他们就会有很多的这样的就是官员呢，通过这样在移民过程中间，在这个过程中间呢，就存在舞弊的现象，所以有很多这样的这种渗透的这样的一个案例，然后呢，这个通过的都是政府所这个相关的这样的一个实体呢，然后呢，逐步呢就是进入到了加拿大这边，有香港，也包括香港和中国。那么同时呢，就是说加拿大的民主呢，在这样的情况之下呢，受到了相应的威胁。
我再提一个问题，以后米娜啊，你提啊，就是说如果我们那个刚才那个书中所说的都是这个真实的话，那么我想请教一下库珀先生，如何从加拿大政府系统本身来加以规避和防范这种系统性的这种问题呢？
Okay, the third question is, if raised concerns in the book are proven true. What measures do you suggest the Canadian government to take to avoid or prevent the exacerbation of the problem? And after this question, and then Mr. Gao and the host Huang is going to transfer and leave the rest questions to Mina. So, Mr. Kooper, thank you.
The answer would be if the allegations are proven true. One issue covered in the book is an early Canadian intelligence report focused on that alleged compromise in Hong Kong, and a number of tycoons in Hong Kong with relationships to organized crime and the Chinese state allegedly were successful in investing large amounts in Canada. The evidence is they were successful in investing in Canadian businesses, and they have been successful in becoming politically involved through donations and influence activities. So I would say that I believe the case is proven, and we're at a point where Canadian Parliamentary Security and Intelligence Committee has recommended that Canada follow similar reforms as taken in Australia. These would be new foreign interference and disclosure laws, so that if it is proven by intelligence agencies and Canadian police that covert influence activities are taking place, for example, through Beijing's United Front activity in Canada, there would be strong penalties. There would be the need for business persons, academics, politicians, influential people in Canada that may be secretly acting for Beijing but not disclosing their interests because lawfully at this point they don't have to. There would be consequences for them if these reforms, such as Australia, were enacted in Canada. And from my perspective, many of my intelligence and law enforcement, even political sources that I talked to for this book, believe we are already at the point where this activity is needed in Canada, both to protect Canada's democracy and to protect diaspora communities, Chinese Canadians, Hong Kong Canadians, that complain that they have been subject of surveillance or harassment from some of the actors that are being directed by actors that I expose in this book, connected to the casino money laundering and connected to Chinese consulates.
Okay. 是说，就是说，如果是这些问题呢能够被证实是真实的话呢，他是说这个加拿大的这个情治机构呢，其实已经在这个香港的，特别是刚才提到的这个香港的问题中，已经提到了这个加拿大的目前的这个处境上面是已经被 compromise 了，已经就是说受到损害了。那么在这样的情况之下，他们已经成功的通过。特别是香港这个富豪的这个案件，通过这样的，他在政治上，他在生意上都已经向加拿大的这个生意有所这个渗透。那么在这些问题上呢，在他看来，其实是不是会证实，而是已经证实了的一个结果。那么在这样的一个情况之下呢，就是加拿大的这个国会有一个委员会，那么同时呢，也是澳洲也同样都产生了这样的一个这个法案，这个法案就是要求这个外国影响注册的这样的一个法案。通过这样的注册法案呢，让一些隐秘的在加拿大的这样的这些活动呢都能够登记注册。那么特别是有些活动呢是跟这个比如讲是这个中国的统战部门，然后所这个组织召开的。那么这样的话呢，要求在这样的立法之下就会有相应的处罚性的结果。这种处罚性的结果呢，是可以包含是在加拿大的学者呀、官员啊，这些人如果不公开的话，他们都会受到这个法案所带来的处罚。而这样的处罚，从他个人意见来看呢，一方面当然是对这个加拿大的保护，但同时也是对在海外的这个华裔社区的一个保护，因为他们这个案件的调查和调研中间发现，华裔社区里面有很多人呢是受到了在这些所调查的一些经济犯罪活动中间受到了大量的骚扰，而这些骚扰者呢都 都是跟这个就是说这个赌场的钱啊、洗钱啊都是有关的，所以他是从这个角度来分析的。Thank you。
米娜，我顺着刚才的问题，我再问一个问题，
OK，
然后再是刚才那个库珀说到呢，就是澳大利亚的那个通过的那个法案。那么我知道呢，这个加拿大那个华人国会议员那个赵景荣啊，他呢最近也提出了一个个人法案， C282， 叫外国人影响注册法。那么这个法案呢，其实在美国呢早就已经实施了。那么可以说呢，加国政界呢似乎是现在是特别关注您书中提到的这些问题。那么我的问题是，您认为未来加拿大推出和澳洲已经通过的叫反外国人干预法的可能性有多大？
Okay, so according to Mr. Gao, then our Chinese Canadian member of Parliament Kenny Chu sponsored a private member bill, which is C2A2, the Foreign Influence Registry Act, which imposes an obligation on individuals acting on behalf of a foreign principal to file a return when they undertake specific actions with respect to public office holders. So how do you think, and which actually, and there's already existing a similar bill in the United States, and so how do you think a bill like such could help eradicate foreign influences in Canada?
That's a great question. I knew MP Chu was wanting to pursue such an activity, and I talked to him and said that's very reminiscent of the statutes put forward in Australia. And I think if such bills were adopted, that is the first step needed in holding people to account. You know, when I don't want to dive into a politically sensitive topic, but when we have, for example, letters written from people close to the former Liberal Prime Minister Chrétien inserting themselves into the debate over the court case involving Man Wanzhou, this leads to speculation on the part of some Canadians. Are they acting for interests other than their own conscience? Could there be persons or interests behind them, encouraging them to make such legal arguments that may go against the conscience or the reasoning of other Canadians? So I think MP Chu's proposed act and ones such as those would go a certain distance towards getting clarity around those kinds of situations. And I applaud MP Chu for thinking along those lines of actions that have already been taken in Australia within the past 3 years.
所以他是有知道这个，就是Kenny Chu 这个赵景荣议员呢，在这个中间有一个个人的这样的一个 bill， 然后呢，也是在这样的一个个人的一个法案的私人法案的这个过程中间呢，就看到就是说像类似于澳洲这样的话呢，就能够使得很多这个相应的这些相关人员啊，都可以呢，就是让他们对他们的行为呢负责。那么从这个也可以看出呢，比方说我们的在加拿大的上下文里面，加拿大的前这个叫总理克里田总理呢，也在这个孟晚舟的之后呢，也写过应该是他的阁员还是他自己，或者说有阁员的话，他前阁员他有写过信呢，是在这个给孟晚舟这件华为的案件上面呢有求情。那么也就可以看到，就是说这个会让大家引起有充分的警惕，就是说这个后面是不是还有其他的这些推手在后面，然后呢这样的话呢，这个问题呢就一直带在，就有很多人加拿大人都会带着这样的问题，所以从这个角度来讲呢，就是他的这个私人法案呢一定会将这件事情呢往前推进一定的距离，所以他对于这个赵景荣议员呢所做的这样的努力呢是鼓掌的，然后是支持的。
I'm going to actually ask Sam Kooper in English directly, and would you mind to do the translation for me as well? Thank you. I'm looking at the YouTube, and one of the audience actually writing from Hong Kong, And his comment, Thomas Wu's comment was that he couldn't get the book, your book, in Hong Kong's bookstore called the Book Central. And he has to order it from Amazon. So it looks like there's some kind of a press limitation on freedom of information and freedom of press in Hong Kong happening right now. When during your process in your interview, were people that you approach hesitant in talking to you? Are they afraid, worried? What are those worries, concerns, that's my first part of the question. I'll ask the second part later.
OK， 所以我的翻译是说，这个他刚才讲说，他看着这个油管的直播里面呢，有一位来自于香港的这个观众叫 Thomas Wu， 他说在香港没有办法买到，只能到这个亚马逊上面去订购。然后呢，他是说，貌似呢好像是有香港的出版各方面呢可能有所这个收紧。然后他是这个 Mina 的 question 是说，在这个Sam Kooper 先生在去调研的过程中间、采访的过程中间，很多人呢似乎对于他受采访的人呢不敢谈有些的问题，所以就是说，请问就是说这些他们的顾虑有哪些？到底在哪里？为什么那么严重
？Great question. The sources for my book come from different areas. Some come from the Chinese Canadian dissident community. Some come from the Hong Kong Canadian democracy movement. Some come from Chinese Canadian political community. Some would be active law enforcement and intelligence operators. All of the sources have their different areas of concerns and needs for source protection, and indeed journalistic freedom demands that I protect my sources, and I take the pressure rather than them. And I tried to do that as much as I could. When we established that there are real concerns of surveillance or harassment, indeed, some of my sources in the Hong Kong Canadian community asked that I not use their names. I investigated an incident in the fall of 2019 where Hong Kong Canadians were inside a church in Vancouver. They felt that they were targeted in a counter-protest from actors related to the Chinese consulate, United Front groups, and what I found were associates of some important, I will say, RCMP suspects. So I, of course, gave the sources inside that church protection because they faced real threats online of violence. They had to be escorted to safety in that incident by Vancouver police. So that would be, I think, a vivid example of when we need as journalists to provide the cover of anonymity to such sources. Law enforcement sources took great risks to leak confidential documents to me in my reporting process so that I could make connections between organized crime suspects and people involved in state activity, according to my research. Some of those people ended up talking on the record because their names through the Cullen Commission came out into the open. Others remain protected by journalistic privilege and source protection, both because they leaked confidential documents, and also some informed me that they have real concerns that they would be targeted by state-sponsored cyber hacking activity if their names were exposed. So those are a couple of examples to a great question, Mina.
OK， 所以像这个加拿大的这一块呢，就是说谢谢米娜的这样的一个问题，因为它主要是谈有什么样的不敢谈。那么在这一块上面呢，就是比方说在香港，它主要是提到以香港的一个为例的话，当时呢就是在这样的反对的过程中间呢，他所接洽的这个里面有反对的人，有加拿大人本身是加拿大华裔，然后有来自香港的社区，然后有在加拿大的反对的 就是反对中国的这样的一个活动和组织的，然后同时呢，这个中间还有加拿大的华人的政治的一些社团，然后包括了还有就是说很多的执法人员，那么这是他们的所有的人都共同都带着一些很多的顾虑和来参与到这样的这个就是被采访中间，所以他作为新闻记者的话，对于他的信息来源的保护就变得很加的重要，因为他都是说希望的，就是说很多人都不希望被监视、被骚扰，那么他就不用这个根据他是说有一个案例是在2019年的时候呢，这个有一个本地的温哥华的一个这个叫教会里面有香港的这样的一个来自香港的反对的力量，他们就看到他们有恐惧是说受到这个在本地的这种就是反对的那些人，那么这中间有包括就是像统战部啊这样的一些人，而且这里面的对他们骚扰的里面也有一些人呢是 RCMP 就是我们皇家骑警的所熟悉的人物，那么对于他们而言呢，他要就是说面对他就是作为英文记者所面对的这样的他的受访者的这种保护，一直是他的重要的一个部分。那么在信息包括有很多的这样的执法人员呢也愿意把信息呢能够就是说输送给他，那么这一部分的信息里面呢，就是有一部分的人在最后呢通过加拿大的一些委员会呢，使得他们的名字公开了，那么旗下的有一部分人的信息呢还是继续受到保护的。那么在这个就是说在还是他们最大的concern还是来自于被精准的被 target 了，然后的话呢被认定是有被这个就是被目标跟踪之后，然后他们带来的这个不安全感。谢谢。
During your investigation research, being a white Canadian journalist, you're investigating in a Chinese community. You have a language barrier, you have cultural barrier. How have you been received, and what are the challenges when you're doing your research and when you are writing this book of yours?
OK， 所以的话就是说，在这个调研的过程中间，作为一个白人的这样的一个记者，但是访问在华裔社区的这样的事情的时候，你遭遇到的是语言和文化上的障碍。那么就是说，你是如何被这个华裔的这个社区所接受的？然后你在中间所遭遇到的，就是在调研和最终成书的这个过程中间，你遭遇到的挑战是什么 ？Thank you.
Another great question, and I'll start by apologizing for my inability to speak in Mandarin or Cantonese. I joked with the show host before going live that I had spent several years in Japan, and I came away with very little Japanese language ability, but I came away with an appreciation for East Asia culture, and I do think in some ways my time in Japan has given me a passion for understanding Asian culture, Chinese, Japanese, cities like Hong Kong and Tokyo. Challenges that I face, I would say I start really with going to community members that are very passionate about issues within the diaspora and cities in Canada. And I get a lot of great information from all sides, from Hong Kong Canadians and Chinese Canadians. Some of my, to use a specific example, some of my early real estate investigations, it was sources from Chinese Canadian business community that reached out to me with information and often help understanding cultural issues. And if you're standing from a distance and only looking at documents or trying to understand an issue at a distance, it's difficult to report in a deeply accurate way. And I would be the first to admit that I haven't always been fully successful in understanding cultural issues, but I'm always seeking to learn more and seeking to talk to as many voices as possible from within the community. And I think over the years I've learned and grown in that area. In terms of should we have people of certain races reporting on certain racial issues? I do believe in a multicultural society. We should not. We should have a multiplicity of reporters if we're talking about journalism, helping each other understand issues within all communities. And in the book, I give credit to people like Chuck Chiang, my former colleague at the Vancouver Sun, who with an amazing set of interviews helped me understand a very important case involving transnational transactions and a man that felt that he was a victim of a fraud involving a Liberal MP's law firm. I also credit my amazing Global News colleague, John Hua, for the reporting we've done together at Global News regarding the more recent casino money laundering scandals in British Columbia. So I would love to say that I will pick up more Chinese language ability in the future as I continue my cultural investigations.
好的，然后呢，在这个问题中间呢，就是说，他首先是提到了在节目开始之前呢，他也说过他并不说中文，然后呢，但是呢，他跟主持人在节目开始之前有聊到过他在日本稍微待过一些时间，但在日本待过的时间中间呢，他也没有说太多的日语。但是呢，他对于东亚的整个文化呢，是在通过日本的这个过程中间呢，使得他非常有愿望和有热情去了解。然后呢，他主要是说，他说类似于像香港啊、东京啊，他是非常有这样的意愿去了解。所以遇到的这样的挑战的过程中间呢，比方说他要到这个社区去采访的时候，发现社区的其实有很多人都非常有热情的来提供信息，这里面有香港的华裔，也有这个中国的华裔，那么这些都是这个加拿大人。那么通过像类似于像地产的这个案件呢，像类似于这个中国的这个商业的一个社团社区啊，就提供了很多丰富的信息，来帮助他准确的了解这些案件这个背后的文化的这个因素在里面。因为他是说，如果你站得很远去看这些文档的时候呢，其实有时候对于一些报告呢不好理解，那么通过他们的帮助呢，就使得他能够很好准确的来理解。然后在这样的一个协助的过程中间，他一路走来呢也是比较成功的，然后呢掌握和学习到了这个中间的这些信息的准确度就被大大的提高。然后呢他也是说这个在一系列这个写的过程中间，他一直在学习和成长的一个过程中间。然后关于是说，因为他是个比方说白人的记者的话呢，他说是不是需要一个比方说某一个族裔的记者才去报道另一个族裔的这个同族裔的事情的话呢，他是说他相信多元文化，然后呢可以有不同的角度去报道，然后呢对所有的社区问题都可以去谈。那么他也在这个写的过程中间呢，他有对他比方说温哥华太阳报的这个同事叫 Chuck Chen 呢有所这个给予他这个提到他，因为他在一个重要的国际案件中间呢提供非常重要的协助，帮助他一同协作，然后呢完成了这样的报道。同时他也在他曾经任职的 Global News 啊，然后中间呢这个提到了叫Joanne Kwan， 然后的话也是张宽，然后他呢也是在这个关于赌场的这个案件中间呢，也是做了很多的协助，所以他是未来呢，他也希望能够有更多的这个学习这个比方说中文，然后呢能够更好的来进行调查。
现在观众有一些问题想请教一下那个霍普先生
There may be some questions from the audience.
Sure.
这位叫 Emma 她说呢，在2020年疫情发展的时候呢，有一些华裔呢给中国的亲友呢，寄去了一些个人的一些防护的用品，那么给慈善机构呢也捐款，那么是出于人道主义比如他自己也是做的。他呢还收到了这个中国朋友寄来的2包口罩，他想请教一下Sam Kooper 先生， 为什么你故意忽略了这个事实，而将民间自发的这种 PPE 就是救援呢，就是归纳为中国政府的阴谋？
Okay, so there's a question from the audience named Emma. And during the pandemic in 2020, there are many Chinese Canadian, and then they actually mailed PPE like masks and other supplies to their Chinese relatives, these relatives in China, and also donated to charities, and all based on humanitarianism, and like herself. So she also donated and contributed to both Canadian and Chinese charitable organizations, and also she herself received parcels of like face masks from her Chinese friends. So her question to Mr. Sam Kooper is like, why did you neglect and this basic fact, and also deliberately and categorize these between community and like between the Chinese and the Canadian communities, and these like PPE supply and a contribution all categorized into a state-sponsored kind of a conspiracy?
Thanks for the question. At the time of the PPE investigations, there were a main story and also radio interviews that did include greater detail around that humanitarian effort. In my book, I get into much greater detail about the nature of the PPE operation, and indeed credit that a number of Chinese Canadians did send care packages to relatives out of the simple need and belief that those supplies would be needed. And my book makes mention that that is a wonderful activity. I take a deeper dive into what actually happened in the state-sponsored PPE operation and draw the distinction that a humanitarian effort was beneficial with the understanding that the coronavirus could be contained within China. This is the right activity for everyone in the world to send the supplies where they were needed. My book makes the case that what is wrong was mounting evidence that the Chinese state, as early as October 2019, had knowledge that the illness spreading in Wuhan was very serious. This was covered up, and the rest of the world was in the dark. So what is wrong here is when the Chinese consulate, I'm asserting it's reasonable to believe, had knowledge that the Chinese central state had about the nature of the risk. So for the United Front groups to be mobilized to send what can only be called more industrial-sized shipments to China, let's draw the distinction very clearly between community members sending care packages and activities organized through consulates at an industrial state level to send pallets of PPE. So my book makes the case that China's state knew something that the rest of the world didn't. And I'm sure all the viewers of this channel are aware that there are increasing calls to look at both the timeline of how the pandemic emerged, what was known, who knew it, and what was covered up, and what was the real origin. And I think there was a very asymmetric situation for all Canadians, Chinese Canadians, Canadians of all backgrounds. They didn't have the information as to whether that PPE was needed within their own communities and cities in Canada, or whether it should have been sent through consulates to China.
OK， 所以他是说，在这个加拿大的媒体上面呢，有很多的关于这个就是防护用品的关于这样的一些故事的报道，然后这些故事的报道呢，很多都是基于像人道主义，这个没有问题。然后呢，他主要是说，在这个他做了一些深入的调查，然后呢，在他的书里面也提到了像社区之间的这样的关于 就是防护用品的捐赠，然后呢，他也给予了他就是说是 credit， 就是认可这些活动本身呢，它是具有人道主义精神的。然后它的主要的区分是区分开个人和社区之间的关于就是这个防护用品的一些捐赠的活动跟政府的一个行为。他是说从他这边从他这书里面所写到的话呢，有出了问题的地方就在于有证据表明，就是当时中国政府在武汉疫情爆发的，就是说是在武汉爆发的疫情啊，在开始的时候呢，有政府表明，首先这个事情呢是有被遮盖掩盖，然后呢，中国的这个政府呢是有通过他们是知情的，并且他们有通过类似于像统战这样的部门呢，他们进行的是一个工业级的，也就是他说的 industrial 的，就是说大量的这样的 PPE 的这样的一个分发。那么通过他们在调查这个疫情过程中间的时间表，然后可以看到这个疫情从开始爆发到掩盖，那么整个这个过程中间，那么这个就是说政府的在这个过程中间的一个参与度，所以呢，他是说这个所以这是他是从一个不同的角度来谈这个就是防护用品的一个捐助活动。
那个说到这个事情，我就想问一下这个 Sam Kooper 先生，这个去年上半年的时候呢，Sam Kooper 写了一篇文章，是关于华人社区一些侨领跟黑道跟洗钱有关的报道。那么之后呢，加拿大华人社团一些社团呢是发表了声明认为呢这是一种污蔑也是一种歧视。那后来呢，好像还是筹钱准备和库珀先生呢是要打官司。我借着这个机会想请教一下库珀先生，您对华人一些社团的这种强烈的反应有些什么评论呢？
And also, Mr. Kooper, so the question from Ms. Gao is, in 2020, based on his recollection, you wrote an article about overseas Chinese leaders and then underworld crime and the money laundering activities, and all the association of them. And so some Chinese groups deem the article and also the previous articles negative propaganda, defamatory and discriminatory. And they made statements about that. And some even actually contemplate to contest in lawsuits. So what is your response to such extraordinary repercussion?
Yes, that topic is investigated in detail in one of the chapters of my book. There was a source that I'll only identify as a Chinese Canadian academic, along with my sources in intelligence and law enforcement, identified that this was a state-related backlash against the PPE story. Let me say that I understand community members that sent care packages back very well may have been had feelings that were mixed about the story. Again, let us distinguish between that and an organized state effort to roll out petitions against a story that exposes those United Front networks and the connections to organized crime actors. So I won't make my answer too long, but my book reveals that actors, including a real estate lawyer for Mr. Paul King Jin, were involved in a crowdfunding campaign to try to raise this class action donations for a class action lawsuit to discourage my reporting or to strike back hard, as a well-known Vancouver media personality said in media interviews. There was an organized effort, according to the evidence and the argument put forward in my book. And I think I can speak for myself that that's an attack on the freedom of the press. There's a difference between having mixed feelings or hurt feelings about a story and taking part in a crowdfunding campaign with what appear to be known RCMP suspects. And I think that that is an attack on the freedom of the press. And I'm glad that some other members of the media recognized at the time. And perhaps when they read my book, they will see a deeper level of evidence on the case.
Sure. And 他是说，在他的这个书里面的这一章节，有一章节的专门就写到了这个，因为他们是说，就是有这个情治部门，包括法律的执法部门呢，有表现有一个这样的一个华裔的这个就是跟学院有关的，他是 Chinese academic 这样的人呢，有涉及到这个过程中间呢，然后是跟政府有关的这样的一系列的活动，然后他还是跟前面的一个问题稍微有些牵连的，就是说他理解在社区里面，当你参与到很多活动去分发或者说参与一些事情的过程中间，然后呢，这个个人的感觉是会有一个非常混合的感觉，因为你也参与其中，但是他想区分开的就是说，一个是关于政府所参与的这样的一样的力量和这个背景，然后呢，特别是说这个中间呢是有这个就是统战的这个背景的这些机构啊，然后呢，他们有一些就是说有组织的这样的一个犯罪嫌疑人，然后他的这个书里面呢就展现出了就是有比方说一个地产的律师，然后呢通过他里面的一个主人公叫保罗金啊，是吧？然后呢这样的一个人呢是个华裔啊，然后的话呢是当时呢就是筹款要做一个就是集体诉讼，然后这个集体诉讼呢就是希望呢就是来这个打消对抗掉他这个不鼓励他做这方面的这样的一个报道，然后呢，这样的有很多的证据都在这样的书里面有展现，这个是对于加拿大的这个出版自由的一种攻击，然后的话呢，这种就是比方讲说也有证据表明他们有一些是比方说 RCMP 就皇家骑警的一些熟悉的人物是关于专门做这个众筹的这样的一些金融的这种这个不当行为的这样的人都有参与其中，所以的话这是他的一个回应。
还有一位观众提到了一些涉及一些书中一些个人的问题，这个基尼你看一下这篇，这个就是关于涉及到丁果和一个叫独立一个摊员胡元豹的。
Sure. There's a question from Stephen Lee. Mina, 胡元豹的英文是什么？Muted. Mr. Cooper, I'm just checking the name, English name.
I think it's a 元炮户。
哦，元炮户 ，OK。
Yeah.
所以说，他说这里面把这个就是 Mr. 丁国 and also there's a Mr. Hu Yuanpao and described as lobbyists from or for Beijing and served Beijing's interests. And so they were a producer of a multicultural TV station in Canada, and there's another one who's an independent senator, and they're also respected community leaders. So do you have actually evidence to support your assertion? And so you and also you made a petition, and then accordingly, like Mr. Dean and also Senator who, and then they did not know. So according to your petition, so what evidence do you or did you have that these activities are related to them? Thank you.
I'm not sure I understand the linkage of a petition.
I have no idea. It says Chinese is actually petition, so I'm not even that aware of like what's the affiliation. But I think the very first question, basically, if they were described as lobbyists for Beijing and China's interest, and as one a Canadian senator, the other as a TV personality. So, did you have evidence to support your statements?
The evidence comes from the meeting activity, the meeting message, the frequency of the meetings, and the alignment with Beijing's messages. The evidence regarding Mr. Ding and his linkages to Zoom meeting where the ideation of a lawsuit was brought forward come from transcript evidence and sources within meetings. And the evidence of Senator Wu and these meetings that Mr. Ding is involved with comes from screen captures, again, forwarded to me by sources within those networks. And I think I will conclude the answer with, let's listen to the message, look at the meetings, and see how well they align with Beijing's interests. Look at the timing of what is said and think of the motivation behind it.
OK， 所以他是说这个主要是说这些他来的证据呢，都是来自于就是说一些会议的纪要啊。然后的话呢，然后把这些会议的纪要呢，跟这个主要是跟北京的一些信息呢做一些关联，这个可能比较具体，因为我对这个上下文可能不是很熟悉。因此呢，他是说在这个丁先生这边呢是有一些也是关于这些信息，然后包括胡元豹这个 Senator 这边呢，他也是有这个关于就是一系列的一些抓屏啊，就是捕捉屏幕的这个 screen capture 的信息，然后他们主要是通过就是说这些信息的内容，然后比较当时北京的一些这个信息呢做对比，然后在对比之后呢，就展现出就是说他们的表述呢跟北京的表述呢表现出的就是说一致性。
Mina， 那个你还有什么问题啊？我可以插进。
一个有问题就是说Sam, when you're doing your research, how do you build your trust and connections with your witness, with your sources, and how do you get them? How do you get your source? Because it just blew my mind when I read your book, the sources, the risk they're willing to take, and so how do you first get them, connect with them, and then second, how do you build that trust with your sources?
所以就是说，这个米娜对于Mr. Cooper 的问题是说，他主要是在这个调研的过程中间是如何去跟他所调查的这个访问的对象，然后呢，就建立起这种信任的。然后他是说，在阅读的过程中间，他非常震惊这个过程中间所受访者所带来的这种危险。所以的话，就是更想知道是如何来这个建立这样的，从哪里找到他们，并且呢，在什么样的方式上建立这个互信。
It's a great question, and I will just answer it in the context of relationships. Source relationship is very similar to just a human friendship relationship. You as a journalist, you encounter people that are interested in the same issues that you are covering. When you meet, you exchange ideas. Each person assesses the other person's character, intelligence, trustworthiness, and it goes from the first meeting. It's a very, in some ways, natural process, and there has to be trust involved. And if you want to stay in the journalism game for more than a few years, you have to respect sources. And I would say that you learn. Your editors, the business side of journalism may want certain things from you, and there will come a time where you have to push back and protect your sources and say, it's not the time for a story. Even though it's hot, I want to back away. I don't want to put my source in that situation. So it's a learning process, and it's really one of the things that I enjoy about journalism, that those relationships and the process of building knowledge between people that have a passion for subjects.
好的，他是说这个妮娜，你要不要先 mute 一下？有杂音。
Sorry?
Can you mute? Yes. 它主要是说这个关系的中间呢，主要是它就像很多正常的这个自然的这个过程中间，他在采访的过程中间，其实他们跟这个信息源头的关系其实跟朋友的关系是差不多的。那么在这种时候呢，记者跟公众的谈话、收集信息，然后呢，这个其实就要很多的都是跟他们去谈，然后有时候甚至在一开始他就能感受到这样的这种 这个真实度，然后在这个慢慢的过程中间呢，自然的达成一种互相的信任。然后呢，新闻的时候呢，就是一样的，他们有很多的这样的信息来源，而作为信息来源的这种保护就变得非常重要。有时候他在工作的过程中间，也会有人要问他要他的信息来源，然后他一般都是会 push back， 就是不让这些信息来源与曝光，然后呢以更好的保护。所以他是很享受在就是说新闻从业的过程中间呢，不断的就是说通过认识知道了解信息，然后增长知识，然后跟对很多话题其实是有热情的人呢进行沟通。
I'm also going to ask you the next question on how in your research study how the money, because the Chinese government has a regulation how much money, foreign currency you can bring, take it out of China. So there's this control, and yet how the money could be smuggled out, even with Chinese government's control over this flow of foreign currency, and is it still happening right now?
Is that still happening a question, or it's a
no, how the money in his research find out how the cash,
okay,
the flow from China to Canada, and to be used in money laundering and all that, and how does that? Because a lot of people don't believe that number and that can be done, because they told me that Chinese government has this control and the regulation as to how much you can bring out of China.
Okay, thank you. 他刚才米娜这个女士说的问题呢，是说中国因为本身中国政府呢是有规定有多少钱可以汇出汇进，所以呢对于这些钱呢能够就是说成功的汇到中国的境外的时候呢，有很多人其实是迟疑不敢相信，就是说以这样的规模和数字，所以究竟是这些事情是如何发生的，通过一种这种非法和地下的方式。
So it occurs through underground banking. And I think what is groundbreaking about this book is it tried to break down that concept of underground banking and make it very visible. And what my advantage was breaking those casino stories and explaining how hockey bags of up to $1 million in Canadian 20s were entering casinos, and with one whale gambler, one VIP baccarat player. How did it happen? Someone in Macau, Hong Kong, or China makes a deposit to an underground bank that is connected to organized crime. This person has an arrangement with loan shark gangs in Richmond, BC. They travel to Richmond, YVR, they land, and very quickly outside in a parking lot near the casino, they get their delivery of the bag of cash. This is one transaction, could be 500,000, could be $1 million, but it's repeated so many times that, for example, about $200 million were estimated of this type of transaction to be laundered through BC casinos, mostly River Rock Casino, in 2014. So what my law enforcement say is people don't understand the breadth and the depth of this underground banking network with connections to Hong Kong, Macau, Shenzhen, and cities around the world where the community has business interests. This is how money evades the capital controls. But there are other ways, including large-scale wire transfers related to dubious businesses that could be connected to organized crime or could be connected to state actors in China and Hong Kong. Other ways include trade-based money laundering, which is a very complicated concept I don't want to get into in this call, but it's believed to be the largest method of capital transfer out of China and money laundering around the world right now.
好的，然后这个问题呢，就是说像这个主要这本书呢，就是如果是说有撼动作用的话，就是在这个地下钱庄的转钱的过程中间，因为通过地下钱庄，它是用一种可见可视的方式呢，展现了整个所谓地下洗钱的这样一个概念，就是说，比方说有100万，他举例就是说这个100万如何通过一个 赌徒，然后利用20块钱的小票子，然后就可以通过赌场的进行流转，然后有些钱呢是从香港、澳门、中国地区，那么可能就放进去了，然后同时呢，在这个很快的时候呢，就通过这边的放债的这些人呢，在温哥华的列治文呢，就可以这个提取这些钱呢可能是50万，可能是100万，然后整个在2014年的期间呢，就在温哥华地区的叫 River Rock 这样的 casino 呢，就有2个亿的这样的钱呢是这样走私进来的，所以他是说主要是展现下地下钱庄这个洗钱规模的一个宽度、一个深度，因为它有个 breadth and depth。然后在这样的情况下，钱呢不受监管的被传出来，然后呢，在这个有很多这个背后的人呢，也是跟这个政府啊，当然这里的政府是指中国政府后面有关的这些生意有关，然后呢，也通过这种生意不受监管的被转出来。然后他也提到了一些就是根据贸易相关的，然后呢对钱进行这个叫洗钱的，但是这个内容呢，因为它的这个整个的概念比较复杂，它在这边不便作于展开，但是这也是一个更复杂的一种，就是这个叫洗钱。但洗钱呢，it's a personal kind of a note, so it's my just a kind of a addition on it， 是洗钱本身在加拿大的中文的上下文它有时候比较模糊，但加拿大的上下文就是但凡这个钱的来源不能被解释的时候，都叫这个叫洗钱。I was just adding a little bit definition about money laundering. So thank you.
因为有人反问我，就是说关于你这本书啊可能因为还在市面上不是很就是除非订之外呢才能拿到这本书，所以在市面上不知道有没有这种在哪里有的卖啊哈，因为有很多人都说啊，你这个书没有这个事实，没有这个这个真正的证人的这个名字啊，或者是这方面的详细的这个证据都是好像都是很悬的，很那个模糊的。还有就是说，现在就是因为这个就是很多仇视亚裔的这个问题存在，所以呢，你用这本书呢是来就是博眼球啊，好有市场这样子的哦，就是你能不能 ？Sorry,
you're supposed to ask in English, right?
Oh, sorry.
Okay, no problem. You already did that part, so okay. It's just you can just ask the question also in English. So that's
okay. So I'll do that. Okay. Okay. What I'm asking is that as I was promoting this event, and a lot of people responded to me and saying that, oh, like this book seems to have a lot of vague, this. Information seem to have a vague resources, a lack of facts, and it's because is it because the book is not in the bookstore yet, and only by booking? Because that's how I bought mine. It's I reserved and bought it, and then that's how I got my copy. So that's one thing I think a lot of people may not had a chance to read your book. Because in your book, there are evidences and witnesses, but I did notice quite a few witnesses are anonymous, like they don't want to give out their names. You have to protect your sources. How do you convince people that what you're saying in this book that are how should I say, that are factual? And that is that people don't, because a lot of people were like, that's not possible. This is that amount of money. And how do you, in a way, convince people? Photos?
Okay.
Yeah.
That's a great question. I would ask the people, the book comes from a smaller publisher, so it's selling very well. There have, at this point, I understand, due to the pandemic, supply isn't moving as well as we would hope, but I understand that the supply or the printing of books will scale up. And I'm happy to announce we're even looking at a simplified Chinese language translation. if that market exists, the book, I believe, needs to get out there. The book is filled with facts and evidence and documents. I somewhat, I guess, humorously held up that photo if people want to understand the level of cash involved in an underground bank or the casino activity. Regarding the last answer, let me read you from a document from FinTrack, Canadian's financial intelligence agency. I'll just show the picture, and you won't be able to read it, I don't think, very well. It says, this is Exhibit 44 in my photo exhibit and document exhibit section. Bottom line, what is going on? Real estate is not the only problem. Demand exists on both sides. Organized crime has a lot of cash. Need to move it out of Canada. Chinese citizens have access to cash. Limit of 50,000 restricts their ability to spend. This leads to development of services. So there is a documentation of this underground banking system. If anyone wants to screen capture that. These are FinTrack charts. This isn't anonymous sources. The evidence in this book, the figures, the facts, the personalities, let me just, no, I won't show that one. The people, the documents, pallets of PPE with consulate officials, United Front leaders, connections, it's all there in facts and evidence.
Sam, I'm holding it, and for people to have a closer look, and sort of.
You're doing it better than I.
Okay. 所以他是说市场上如何买到的这样的问题和第二个问题一起讲，就是说关于就是说他是说这个暂时的话，因为他使用的是一个比较小型的这个印刷的这个出版商，所以的话呢这个刊印的这个规模呢逐步会增大。然后如果是说发现有一个关于华文的这样的市场的话，他也愿意让这个书呢在华文的这个中间见报。那么这个工程中间呢，因为刚才的问题里面说是好像缺少一些就是公开的这样的信息，其实它里面有大量的这个报告事实和这个记录在中间，所以他刚才提到的是在他书这中间呢引用了一个是他的 exhibit 就是证据的44啊，然后这个中间是一个 FinTrack 这个是专门的监管这个金融的，就是加拿大的 financial 的一个这样监管机构的中间的证据，刚才也有一个流程图，所以他是说这种流程图呢就不是一个随便的一个好像一个证据，是非常具有公信力的，所以他是说在比方说这个中间展示出来的是说地产不仅仅是就是说地产有问题，除了地产之外呢，像类似于这样的有规模的这样的犯罪的组织呢，他就开始发现是说像中国公民他比方说他有一定的限制，比方说是5万的这样的这个外汇，然后呢因为有这样的需求要多过5万拿出海外的话呢，这样的这个服务啊，这个转钱的服务呢就应运而生，因此呢他就是说这个就开始逐步的发展，然后这样的话呢，就是为什么也说明了就地下钱庄这个业务的之繁荣。谢谢。
There's actually a question from somebody asking if your book is available in Australia.
I've heard from readers in Australia, South Africa, Europe that have obtained copies through Amazon or related online sellers, and I hope that efforts are underway by the publisher to connect with booksellers in all countries, because we know anecdotally that around the world, certainly there's interest and growing interest. That we've only been released for a week, and I take this opportunity to talk to your audience as evidence that there is interest in the book and the topic.
好的。他说这个他有收到过，除了澳洲以外，还有比方说南非啊、欧洲啊都有问询。所以呢，他说当然通过亚马逊，然后呢这样的话，他们的出版商呢也在寻求跟其他各个地区的各个国家的出版商的一个联系。然后这本书毕竟只出了1个星期，然后像类似于今天这样的节目呢，也是一个非常这个一个证明。这个证明就是说这个本书是有一定的市场的。然后这个老黄，你刚才下面 Ivan Pack 有个问题，你能不能拿出来我读一下？Ivan Pack 就刚才有个问题。
Okay, yeah. Ivan Pack. Hey, Sam, from someone you blocked on Twitter, this is Ivan Pack. I have a question for you. How can you verify whoever you encounter with to provide you the information are legit and authentic?
This is a process of throughout a journalistic career, you learn to verify the credibility of sources and documents, put them together, and the truth follows. And I'll jump ahead. I see Ivan's second question there. Underground banking is run by organized crime. That's a fact. So money that is, as I write in the book, money that is legitimate, such as the case of Yisheng Jiang, who Chuck Chiang helped me interview from the Vancouver Sun. We can have a family man seeking a better life in Canada. How does he get involved in investment? He is induced to go through an underground bank because that was the only way to get large sum above that 50,000 per person export limit out. They found that their money was stolen once or twice through an underground bank, and eventually he was ripped off in Canada. So organized crime is the conduit for that money seeking its way around the capital controls. If anyone wants to have that argument with me and argue the other side, I'll do that all day long.
OK， 是这样的，它主要是刚才的第一个问题是关于就是说如何就是说 verify， 就是说认证信息的可信度啊，就是说这是一个过程，这个过程呢是作为一个新闻工作者常年的一个积累，如何来甄别这个信息的可靠度，然后呢还要做很多的这个信息之间的一个关联的比较。那么关于这个地下钱庄呢，是通过有组织的犯罪这一条呢，在他看来是一个事实。然后呢，这个钱呢，就是说因为在有所限制的情况之下呢，如何把它带到加拿大的话，他刚才举了一个例子，名字我不是特别熟悉啊。然后的话，好像 last name Jan， 然后的话，他主要是就是说这个钱呢，就通过地下钱庄，唯一的方式是能够超过5万块钱，就是通过地下钱庄的方式。然后他在这个汇款的过程中间也有数度被骗。然后呢，这个是他所展现出来的这个问题，所以地下钱庄呢就把它变成这是一个载体，而这个载体呢是可以去规避掉这个监管的。
那个因为时间的关系，那个今天我们已经进行了非常的热烈，已经进行了将近1个半小时，特别是我们的吉米用联合国翻译的这种水准呢，在进行翻译已经非常的累了啊。那个我现在提最后一个问题。就是说，库珀先生提到的，就是说，就像他的书名一样，说是视而不见。那么在这种情况下面，我们海外的华人可以做些什么呢？库珀先生有什么话要跟我们这些旅居在加拿大的海外华人说一说吗
？Okay, and the last question is, what do you think Chinese Canadians or residents can do to confront the willful blindness in Canada?
That's an amazing question, and I think the answer comes in steps. We need laws such as the one Mr. Huyn mentioned that MP Kenny Chiu put forward, where actors for other states would have to come out in the open and face consequences. That way, Chinese Canadian communities that feel that they face pressure, harassment, surveillance, or on the other side, could be induced through greed to take to take the side of another state. They will be protected, and in all ways, Canadian democracy will be protected people will not have, they won't need to come to a journalist like myself and say, please don't print my name because my family within the mainland will face consequences if my name is printed in your book. But I would like to provide this information to you about what I see is a harassment against myself or my community. Or I would like to tell you about this person who may be involved in organized crime and real estate transactions and the Chinese state. They could speak openly if their rights as Canadian citizens are equally protected and fostered. And I'm afraid that what my book has found, at this point, too many, listen, people like Mina Wan are very brave. She has been open in speaking about her beliefs. Not everyone is Mina Wan. The vast majority, I think, of people living in Canadian cities and coming from backgrounds in China or Hong Kong feel some pressure to self-censor, and they feel some feeling that their equal rights as Canadians are not at the same level. They cannot speak openly. They feel pressure from another state. And I believe that Canada's government needs to recognize that and take action.
Okay. 这个问题是说，他认为这应该也要分很多步。刚才中间讲到过，之前加拿大的国会议员肯尼区呢先生呢有这样的这个立法，私人立法的这样的出现，然后呢就要求一些就是境外的或者foreign 的这样的这个foreign 的这样的一些参与者呢要有见光，然后呢就被曝光在外，并且呢根据他们要充分的去透明的自己的这样的这个活动，并且呢由他们的活动所带来的这样的相应的处罚。所以的话呢就是看到了很多的像类似于在加拿大所居住的这样的一个华裔，来自各个地区，他们都分别感受到了这种压力，然后有一些被监视的恐惧，然后有被这个骚扰的恐惧，而这种骚扰的恐惧，这种都是和他们所在成为加拿大公民本身的这种权利保护是不对等的。因为他们人身处加拿大，他们在提供信息的时候是说不要使用我的名字，因为我的家人可能就会因为我的名字而受到这样的破坏。所以他觉得这种保护本身是对是加拿大民族的保护，但同时也是对加拿大很多这样华裔的一个保护。然后呢有太多的这样的人呢就是有这样的顾虑，所以他也看到是说像米娜王女士呢她是比较勇敢，但是不是每一个人都像米娜王女士这样的时候，他感受到的压力，那么作为华裔加拿大人跟一般加拿大人他的这种平等的权利其实是不一样的，因为你遭受的这种恐惧，所以他认为加拿大政府应该有所作为，使得这样的这个行为呢一见这个阳光。
米娜，你还有什么补充？
有一个问题就是我的问题大约最后一个问题就是关于 Colin Inquiry， 就是BC 省政府其实也是受你的这个报道的I'm speaking Mandarin again. The Colin Inquiry, partly because of your reports in the media, that the BC government has eventually set up this public inquiry called the Colin Inquiry, and in the inquiry, there's a lot of reports, really detailed information coming out. Was some of the information included in your books that just covered that came out of Colin Inquiry, or are there information in the inquiry that is not yet covered by your books?
OK， 这个问题是这样的，就是说他是说根据Cooper 先生的一系列的报道的时候呢，我们所在的加拿大的卑诗的政府呢也做了一个叫 Colin 的这样的一个公共的一个问询，这个公共问询里面的报告呢是不是也在他的书里面有所体现，或者说这个书里面的有些东西呢就是还尚未展现在这个报告中的内容还没有到书里面。
Great question. There's a few categories of evidence in my book. I think you're right. The information leaked to me is what triggered the Cullen inquiry. If Ross Alderson at the BC Lottery Corporation didn't share certain confidential documents, there would not have been the level of information exposed to the public that would have necessitated the inquiry. So my book is partly the story of that crucial leaked information and whistleblowers such as Mr. Alderson that helped me understand the problem inside the casinos and really motivated me to dig deeper and go back to Hong Kong and mainland China and certain meetings and certain allegations. Another category of evidence comes from sources within law enforcement, intelligence, or the Chinese, Canadian, Hong Kong community that do need anonymity. Their name's not published, but I've assessed their information essential and accurate. And luckily, my book was published as the Cullen inquiry was just finishing. So right up to the end of publishing, I was able to obtain records that I had not known existed. For example, a very key document from a River Rock Casino executive. This is published in the book, in which the executive says, Xi Jinping's crackdown on money laundering and corruption will bring more business to River Rock Casino. Therefore, let us seek to capitalize on that suspected money laundering business. That evidence is printed in this book, so I'm glad the Cullen Commission happened.
很好，然后他这个中间就说到，他这个根据他很多信息透露给他呢，恰恰是这个刚才提到的卑诗省政府一个公开的这样的一个问询的这个工作的一个开始，所以呢，他很高兴，就是说看到自己的这样的这个书呢，能够为这个公开的这个问询呢，其实是打开了一个做了一个铺垫，所以他更是说他的这个中间书里面所展现出来的信息，更多的是像一个吹哨者的这样的一个工作，然后呢，使得他呢有这样的动力呢，能够继续的深挖下去，然后呢有这个比方说执法人员这个情治人员，那么从这个很多地方所收集到的这个事情之后呢，他中间就提到像这个刚才他已经提到过的，比方说有这个 River Rock 这样的这个叫赌场的然后的执行官有提到过，因为他们是说像中国方面的一些数据和影响，或者说习近平所讲到的一些东西的话呢，导致了会有更多的生意来到这个加拿大这边，所以他们是张开双臂，就是说我们来等于是收割这样的韭菜。
The one of the audience here asked, Emma asked that you in your reports and then also book you talked about every overseas Chinese warrior. I believe it's a quote. You quote that from somebody or someone, but in the Chinese translation, that means that every one of us, even me, I become the warrior for the Chinese Communist Party. So there's this misunderstanding. Could you explain to us how that come from?
这个问题是说，因为当时的一篇文章里面，如果我没有记错的话，这个应该是有一句话的翻译的问题。他说的是每一个海外的这个战士，然后这个翻译最后就是英文里面是说 overseas Chinese warrior 这样的翻译就使得这个中间的信息产生了误解，好比像米娜王女士也会被归类为这个是中国政府的这样的一个武士和战士，所以他是米娜刚才的问题是针对这个中间的一句话。
Yes, this was a quote taken from the Xinhua story, and this is an excised quote, a longer quote, a different translation could have said our warriors against the epidemic, and a shorter quote was presented. I know some felt that there was some intentionality or some motivation to cast aspersions on all people in Canada from China, and that's just not true and not factual.
然后他只是说这本书里面的这句话呢，当然是有不同的这样的翻译，然后有人对这个翻译的解读呢，认为这是故意的，然后对带有动机的，然后呢对他而言呢，他认为这个不是他的动机和他的这个有意这样的来叙述。
因为时间的关系呢，就是我们今天的这个那米娜我们就到这里好吗？就是因为还有好多朋友还有很多的问题，所以我们就是1个半小时已经很快。今天呢就非常的热烈，也非常的我认为那个库珀回答的非常的精彩啊，就是说，所以我在这里也代表所有的观众啊，不管是意见这个一样或者不一样的，非常感谢库珀先生呢能够今天来和我们分享他写作的这么一个这个感受。
Okay, so representing the audience, though some agree or disagree with Mr. Kooper, and so we thank Mr. Kooper your time to participating in this dialogue.
Thank you so much. It's an honor for me to be here, a real opportunity, and I thank you for it.
他说他很高兴来到这边，当然也是一个荣幸能够参与这样的讨论了。
希望那个库珀先生还有更新书能够不久还能够继续跟我们推出
We look forward to your new articles or new books, other books.
There will be more. Thank you.
还会有很多的，谢谢。
好的，再次感谢。那我们今天的节目就到这里结束。再次感谢Sam Kooper先生，感谢所有的观众。拜拜。